Hello. So first of all, what is the purpose of making these videos? I still struggle with this, because my purpose is not being fulfilled really in the current environment. The medium is uh, so reactant, and I don't want to make. I'm not trying to make a movement, and I don't think most people here are. But evidently, like 50% are trying to make a movement. People say even more. But the thing is, I think most people are here for fairly straightforward reasons. It's like, hey, I get to have my say in public. I get some feedback. Um, the confusing part is, yeah, some people that want to do that might also be like, yeah, I wouldn't mind my ideas becoming super popular and leading a whole movement of them. So there's fantasies about that. But really, I mean, the way I see um, the world or the audience or whatever is that people that become popular with a new idea, they get credit for creating that idea often, but really what's going on is uh-oh, I got static on my green screen. Anyway, but really people like to talk to each other, and that's what we're doing. It's like if you're talking to somebody at a party, there's no pressure that you're trying to make a movement. Hey, present yourself right. Edit your comments well. No, you're just talking. And to me, that's what this is. This is a more broad way we can talk with the whole public, including people that made aren't the kind of people that end up at the same parties as us. Um, So first subject, Barklord and Dospook are together in Amsterdam, which is cool. These guys are an example. These are two of my favorite YouTube philosophers. I really like these two guys and talking to them. And I'm a little jealous. They're together hanging out in Amsterdam. That seems fun. So I'm a little jealous. But that's cool. Watching that, no news on that. I don't know what's going on. Um, I'm thinking a lot about impeachment, been interacting with a lot of Democratic Party types, and I'm really just kind of depressed about the whole situation. And, this, like, not impeaching at this point is such bad politics. I mean, look at the Republicans. They make up things. They did how many investigations? Five investigations or something on Benghazi. They will create these kinds of things out of very little source material or even out of whole cloth like Pizzagate. And then they'll just grind their axe on them. And it works. And yet you have Democrats with real crimes like the emoluments, like resisting the oversight of Congress, which is constitutionally mandated, um, like the criminal obstruction of justice. I'm about two-thirds way through the report now. Um, and compared to Benghazi, this is like a huge deal. You could think it's nothing if you want, but it's certainly big enough to make a fuss over, and they're worried. I saw one commenter at Daily Kos go, "Yeah, well, maybe she." Well, one was just like, "Maybe she's being smart. If she goes after him, he's going to start a nuclear war. She's saving the world." Yeah, Pelosi's a genius, saving the world. Sure, okay. Um, but somebody was worrying, maybe she's worried that she'd impeach, it would take out Pence too, she'd be president, and people would be mad at her, the optics would be bad. And can you imagine a Republican worrying that they became president, but the optics, I mean, the point of the optics is to become president. At that point, you hardly have to care. Now, the Democrats, good for them, they're thinking long term, they still care, but they're finding these Republicans who just don't think that way. So to me, I mean, I'll probably end up voting for the Democrat, even Biden or whatever. I mean, I just can't stand Trump. But there's a lot of people that feel like me that'll just go with the emotion. I mean, if the Democrats aren't even going to fight for the rule of law, and Pelosi's like, well, I want him arrested. Well, unfortunately, Pelosi, you're not a county sheriff, so arresting him isn't you. You have impeachment. If you think he should be arrested, but all you have in your arsenal is impeachment because you're in the legislative branch, then you should not the executive or the judicial. Then you should do what's in your power to do. And as usual, they want to have it both ways, and they're probably going to lose. And as I say, you can fault me for it, but what am I supposed to do? I'm a pyrrhonist. Ultimately, to calm my heart, the main method is to accept things the way they are, which is that um, the Democrats are not a very big ally in fighting corruption or anything of the sort. So what are you going to do? You're going to worry about your own life and just try to hold on to that. I don't work in government. If Democrats are out of government, it's not gonna, it's not like, oh, I'm gonna lose my job because I work for them. Nope. So I have my ideas and I have my way of vote, and I'm just one person. Um, yeah, you can count on my vote, but guess what? You're such idiots. You're not doing the thing that your oath to the Constitution requires as a duty that you swore an oath to, and you're not going to do that. So you're saying it's because of politics, but you're also playing politics really bad. So, oh well, you can be in a situation where you should win the war and could win the war, and oh, you've chosen powerful generals that you can't dislodge, and they're morons. And that's kind of the situation. All right, the thing I've been thinking about most, though, is water chemistry and hydrogen bonding. It just occurred to me so much how life is a property of water. Okay, in a given cell, like shown here, the internal of a cell, there's something like half a trillion water molecules in a tiny little cell. Now, what you see shown here, let me animate it a little bit, is a motor protein, and it's walking along a microtubule. Now, as you see, its little feet are clopping along there. Now, the thing is, um, this motor protein is a bit like, a marionette figure. It has the freedom of motion to do those motions we were just seeing. However, how does it make them? How does it make those? Because the water, just random warm water around that molecule, will not make it move like that. And in fact, it's way more detailed and synchronized. So the energy in that kind of motion comes from this ATP hydrolysis, which happens like this. So you have an ATP, which is this molecule shown. And basically, when you break up these phosphorus or phosphate, maybe they're called groups, I don't know, you get a little energy, basically a little explosion of radiant energy that comes out. Now, nobody knows yet exactly how that is turned into this guy walking. Okay, but basically, water has to go in and break up this molecule, and then the energy is released at a particular point. And one way or another, it's like muscles, like all of this marionette freedom of motion that motor protein has. It has to be triggered, right? So these energy proteins have to be fired in the right order, just like muscles, firing to make a coordinated motion. And it's just really so strange and unlikely because what's going on in this chemistry is you have a couple water molecules, and if by random chance they are sort of associated in space like this, um, what you have is okay, water's a polar molecule, so this becomes a negative, the oxygen becomes negative because of electron sharing. It turns out the electrons are slightly more on the hydrogen side than they would have been, right? Because the hydrogen only needs one, but it starts sharing one, so it kind of gets an extra half of one. And so there's a positive and a negative pole on the water molecule. And if they happen to be organized in this way, what can
Of
happen is
electrons
this.
is essentially given by this
Yeah,
oxygen
I'll
to
let him
this
say.
hydrogen proton. So we could draw it like this
So an
right there.
electron
So
goes over
that's
into
just the
there,
hydrogen. Then both of these electrons that are in this pair, that are in this bond, I should say,
right?
go back to the oxygen
Right.
to form, essentially, you could think of this as a pair of
And then this
electrons
guy is
next to the
doing a little
oxygen.
karate
And that
punch,
gives the oxygen license to allow these two electrons to form a bond with the phosphorus. Now, the phosphorus is in the mood.
Now, the phosphorus then does not need this bond it has with the oxygen. So that bond breaks, and these three oxygens in the phosphorus go away, and the energy is released. Now, for that to turn into this thing walking requires, some particular control. It's like marionette strings. Okay, I've got the strings on there. Now to make that walk, I've got to be careful. I've got to fire these things in a particular order. So what I'm getting at is how do things move around in a cell comes down to, who's controlling the strings. We see this thing that's walking like any, creature or whatnot might walk. We've deduced this is going on. And we're wondering, well, it's a marionette. Where are the strings, and where do the strings lead? Because we're even the human body, a dead human body, is like a marionette. It's got all the freedom of motion, but it doesn't move on its own. I could put strings on it, move it around. Okay, and then where's the sentience or the will in that process is whoever's controlling the strings. So we're trying to follow the strings. So the strings are the water. But how could the water be organized that way? Well, maybe magnetic fields or something is using the water, as the strings to punch these phosphoruses and whatnot at just the right place, the right sequence, so that you can trigger an organic motion like taking steps, hauling chemicals along a microtubule. Or, so those strings might lead back to the DNA. But then this is going on all over the cell, far away from the DNA, where these chains, don't necessarily, we have no reason to think they could stretch like that. So right now we're stuck with the strings are the water, and they disappear in the water. So an interesting thing is that, looking at this is the hydrogen bonding. So what you have is these oxygens in a water molecule have a hydrogen bond. So it's not a covalent bond. They're not sharing an electron, though they can. Electrons can slip back and forth like we just saw in the ATP hydrolysis. But basically, it's a non-covalent bond. It's happening because one's positive and one's negative. So they go and they want to be close to each other. And as a result of this, you can get microclusters, including like this shape. And in water, they've found that, yeah, water is not just randomly oriented in there. Inside the randomly oriented water molecules, since they're being moved around so much, there's also these crystalline kind of things you would expect to find in ice or regular water, where they can create these 3D structures where they cluster together. And frankly, you've got a lot of interesting, quantum phenomena that could go on in these water clusters. And this is also how the strings could be connected. I mean, you could have a water cluster like this where the polarized nature of the water is hooking to the edge of a DNA or RNA, and it stretches out like this, and this is what's controlling those motor proteins. But for it to happen, it's not random. It's got to be some sort of computational thing going on somewhere that's striking and firing things just perfectly. So somewhere we're looking for the strings, and what do we expect to find at the other end of the strings is some sort of a computing device that can send these signals in this highly coordinated way. Now, how would that happen? You need a designer or evolution, whatever, separate question. There's got to be some sort of a computational device that would be triggering the events for the water to go in and karate chop the ATP millions of times a second just so that it walks along, and not only it, but all the other ones that are walking along as well, all over at different distances and spacings and all this kind of thing. And so the question for me right now is that computational network going to be in the DNA? It doesn't seem like, to me, the DNA seems like a storage mechanism. It seems to me that the sequencing is in the water. Something is causing the water to form into a computational structure where some of these things can swing back and forth and act as bits and whatnot. Classical or quantum bits, doesn't matter. It has to be, one or the other or both. And one way or another, for these strings to work, something has to be forming the water into these computational units, and then either driving that computation as like a controller drives another controller, or just generating it so that it is the controller. And so I'm starting to think, yeah, life is a property of water, and the computational structures we're looking for are not actually going to be the organelles and things we see in this in the cell. It's going to be the molecular arrangements of the water in the cell. Yeah. So you see how this is not going to make a big movement, but at least I've said it now, and 100 years later, when people go, "Hey, this crazy guy was right," then I will roll over in my grave in a comfortable way.